So now we want to be able to open up the floor to Q&A. So what I will do for you, Sarah, I'm just going to read it off of the chat. So if you have questions for her, by all means, please put it into the chat and I will provide, feed you the questions. So Lauren is saying such an amazing talk already. Let's check here. Sarah says that you're an inspiration. Oh, so Creighton asks, what does your shirt say?
It says Chicago Girls Do It Better. It's made by a local clothing artist, Fat Tiger Works.
Yes, I love that. That's over on Milwaukee, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yes. And Mick says, your parents seem awesome in capital letters.
They are. They're so awesome.
Yes. Yeah. Other questions for Sarah. By all means, don't be shy, right? This is time to interact. So Ashley Taylor, she has a question. Did you want to ask your question out loud, Taylor? Ashley, go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I'm in a bad noise area, but I wanted to ask if you have any suggestions for aspiring PhD students.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, I will say I think I went over talking about my parents, so I didn't get to tell you enough about my trajectory and how I got into a PhD program. But, I am a person who is not scared at all about trying to find experts in some capacity or people who have experienced something and asking them for help. I love asking for help because often people really love giving help. So I think one of my suggestions would be to find other PhD students or current PhD students who are doing work that's similar to yours and reach out to them. When I was a student, strangers reached out to me all the time because they found my information on the University of Chicago website. And almost every school has public information about who their PhD candidates are. So I would find someone who's studying similar things that you're interested in and contact them, ask them what their like trajectory was. I will also warn you that a lot of people come into PhD programs and they were always sort of expected to get there. And if you find people who make you feel like you don't belong or like your profile is never going to fit in, move along to the next person. Because, every year whenever we would share out our list of the students who accepted to be in our next year's cohort, it would always say, where they went to school, what they wanted to study. And it was always, always, always Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Oxford. My year it was Princeton, Harvard, Yale, Oxford, Southwest Missouri State University. And I always thought, of course, someone who goes to an Ivy League school is going to get a PhD. No hate to Ivy Leagues, no hate to private institutions, but of course, that is the trajectory that's set up here. I always wanted to look for who are the randos that are coming from the regional state schools or who are coming from places that don't seem like they're the traditional route in. So depending on what your background is, find those people because those are the people who are I know everyone belongs here, regardless of what your background looks like. Or hit me up too. I'm happy to talk you through it.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Great. And thank you, Ashley, for your question. So we have another really good one from Cheryl. Cheryl, did you want to go off mute?
Sure, yeah. I was just curious, you talked about your 51 weeks a year versus your 1 week a year and that realization. And I wondered if you would just share maybe a little more about, how you sensed that, how you felt that, the kind of the listening to your gut and then the actual making the decision, changing trajectory. Yeah, just a little more would be fabulous.
That's such an interesting question. I think, I majored in business in college. I'm a first generation college student. My parents so wonderfully paid for my college for me. And I think it felt really important to me to pick a major that could make money. So I ended up in business for that reason. And I did love it. But I think, there was nothing that made me want to wake up in the morning about that job. And I think, and punk rock was always something that was really important to me. So whenever and girls rock is really rooted in punk rock. So when I went there, I just felt like it was other people like me. They always gave us camp shirts and we would always shred them up in different ways. Or even just the different kinds of clothes that people would wear, the different ways that people carried themselves. Even the fact, I mentioned that it was awesome for the girls, for the campers to see adults who look different. It was awesome for me to see other adults who found ways to keep that sort of alternative style in their adult lives. And I think that's, and like held the same values as me. People who were, still living with roommates, or people who just found different, they didn't have that like move to the suburbs, have 2 kids kind of lifestyle. And some of them did, which is great. But just the fact that we were all mixed together with people who had chosen different kinds of routes into their adult lives. And I think that was like such a beautiful eye opener, because, I felt like many of us do when we, reach our mid-20s, where it's like, okay, so now when is the point where I start to like hit the adult button and like make all those decisions? But it didn't feel like a button I actually ever really wanted to hit. So I think it was just like this beautiful recognition of the people around me that I was meeting, and the fact that this like, it's like pulling back the curtain on adulthood and seeing that there was like a whole mess of people who also found ways to make adulthood look a little bit more playful and a little bit less serious. So I think it was, and I honestly think it was that Monday when I drove back to work and was just like in tears, like, I don't want to go back. I want to like go back to camp. I was like 26 years old, but I felt like a 12-year-old. It was like, take me back to my friends. So I think it was pretty much like a gut instinct that I like truly could not have ignored if I wanted to.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, for asking a question for our speaker. We're going to bring 2 more questions to your Creative Mornings. Tori, did you want to go off mute to ask yours?
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Sarah. That was very inspirational. I was curious, as a design researcher, or social researcher, do you have a favorite methodology that you like to use when you're approaching a new problem space?
I love this question. I'm a qualitative researcher. I'm an ethnographer and an interviewer, so I'm all qualitative. I love learning from people. I think that, reading things and getting our like base level literature review is super important. But at the end of the day, I don't want to make any assumptions about anyone without talking to them first.
Okay, awesome. Thanks so much, Tori. And our last question for this morning, Natalie, go for it.
Hello. I was curious if you had any thoughts on how the pandemic has impacted these physical spaces for children, like over this last year.
Oh, that is a really good question. I don't know how much I can add to that. I will say, so over the fall, so I started my work at GET in January, and over the fall, I continued my research in virtual classrooms, because especially, the high school I was at, they had rolled out laptops for their students. So the students and their teachers were totally used to working on the internet with laptops. And I figured if anyone was in a good position to make the sort of COVID at home transition, it was them. So I spent the whole fall semester in virtual classrooms to learn. And, I don't have a sense of how physical spaces are changed, because I haven't been able to be in those sort of physical spaces. But I will say that, I think the way that we approached online learning missed a lot of opportunities for kids and was created without kids' input whatsoever. So I do think that, I'm not quite answering your question, but I do think that it will be important to figure out how to build up spaces for kids again, both virtually and physically, because I know that, I'm not sure how many of you know kids or know teenagers, but it was a pretty rough year for them, especially first year and second year college students who had to like move and make that huge life transition and suddenly had to be isolated in dorm rooms. So, I think for adults, we're going to see a lot of changes in how physical and virtual space works. We'll probably see that for kids, but I do think making sure kids are feeling well supported and surrounded by their peers and people who care about them is going to be super, super important. I mean, we all know the sort of mental and cognitive issues we've dealt with becoming virtual people, and, kids do not have that prefrontal lobe cortex yet. So helping get them back to a space where they feel supported is going to be super important.
Woohoo! Yes.